welcome to the debate to round 5 of the second UADC. In government today we have BAU, in opposition K1. My great pleasure to invite first speaker, Prime Minister, to start this debate.
So, Mr. Speakers, in the status quo right now, we see that doctors have full authority to examine the patients. What does it mean? It means that these doctors have the legal right to actually derive vital information, say for example, medical record, say for example, on what is happening on the body of the patient itself. And why it is so? Why they are being trusted by the patient itself? Because in this case, the patient thinks that these doctors are expert and these doctors are more experienced than the patient itself. So that the patient trusts the doctor and the patient would believe in whatever justified by the doctor itself in the first place. The problem with the status quo right now is actually these doctors, they sometimes lie to the patient. What kinds of lying in this case? First one, say for example, they're telling the patient that everything is okay. In fact, it is not okay at all. Second, they're telling that everything is better than the actual condition. So, why they do so? Because they believe that by doing this kind of thing, they protect the patient. They are preventing the patient from what so-called panic, from what so-called depression. We think in the very first place, this is not justifiable. Because why? Because in the very beginning, we can see two major impacts. The first one, the patient can be more shocked once they know the condition in the end. They don't have any preparation. They don't even, they are not even prepared for facing that kind of predicaments. The second thing is, we believe in this case, the mental preparation and also psychological readiness are very paramount things in the medication itself. And this mental preparation and also to psychological readiness are very helping out the patient to finally get themselves cured. While when the doctor commits to this kind of action, these patients have no choice, have no rights to get their mental ready or to do a lot of preventive measures. So we believe in the very first place, it is not justifiable at all. Our stance in this debate is we believe no matter how bad it is, we say it is not justifiable to lie to the patient because we recognize the individual authority on their own body and they're supposed to know their condition, ladies and gentlemen. In this case, to support these arguments, I have 2 points. The first one, how it is infringing the principle of doctor. We're talking about integrity. And the second one, why this is the full right of the patient to know the truth itself. Coming to my first point, in this case, we see that there are a lot of alternatives besides telling the lie itself to the patient. Simply, the doctors can say the truth, say for example, explaining to the patient the actual condition of this patient. But on the other hand, the doctors also can support this patient by simply saying there is a chance for you to recover, there is a medical advancement, and there is a way for you, there are a lot of medical alternatives for you to get cured. In this case, we believe that these kind of important things must be done by the doctors in the very first place. Yes?
You're mostly talking about terminal patients in your example and saying that you still can be cured because there might be something coming up. Isn't that to a certain extent a lie?
Not exactly, ladies and gentlemen. Because why? In this case, once you are a doctor, you have to get through a lot of studies, and one of the subjects that you need to study is psychological approach. In this case, we believe that this is a part of the psychological approach, ladies and gentlemen. We believe that before the doctor tells the patient about their actual condition, they studied already about psychological approach. They know exactly on how to explain something to the patient, even if it is hard to tell, ladies and gentlemen. So in the very first place, we believe that the psychological approach is there. And in this case, the doctor still can say the truth about the actual condition of this patient, while on the other hand, the doctor still can foster this patient, still can do a lot of things, still can commit on doing efforts to cure this patient. We think that once the doctor tells the patient the truth, it would not alleviate the willingness of the doctor itself to do the efforts to save the patient. It is even increasing the willingness of the doctor itself to cure the patient itself because the patient have been more prepared for that kind of condition, ladies and gentlemen. And the third thing, we believe that this is infringing the patient trust itself. Ladies and gentlemen, we think in this case that trust is something mutual. We think in this case doctors are supposed to have what's so-called integrity. And once this kind of integrity is being infringed, we believe that this is something that cannot be retrieved back, ladies and gentlemen. So we believe in this case, this is the kind of appreciation on how the patient trusts the doctor. That means the doctor must be reliable to the patient. Once the doctor is not committing the truth to the patient, we believe that it is infringing the principle of integrity itself. And remember, when we're talking about integrity, this integrity is once in a lifetime. This is not a simple thing that you can retrieve back easily once you have lost it. So in the very first place, we believe that this is infringing the principle of the doctor, which is valuing what's so-called human right and also what's so-called integrity. Yes, sir.
You're saying that you'll never lie except in cases where there's psychological benefits. The motion that you're supposed to support is that you're never allowed as a doctor to lie to your patients. Keep to the motion, sir.
Well, again and again, ladies and gentlemen, what we're going to do in this case is we want to tell the patient the truth because we think that by telling the patient the truth, there are a lot more benefits that we can get, especially for the doctor and also the patient. This is preparing the patient so that they can be more ready. And this mental readiness is very important. This is a vital part of medication. If you are not ready, say for example your mental is normal and then you are being given the same medication, of course it would be much different whenever you know that you are sick, so you have to put more efforts to get cured. Of course, the efforts of the patient to get cured is much more tangible in this kind of level, ladies and gentlemen. So we believe in this case, once the doctor tells the truth, there is going to be what's called mental and psychological readiness in the terms of the patient itself. Second point is about why the patients have the right to know the truth. There are two kinds of possibilities in this debate. First one, when the disease is incurable, the patient at least can prepare. The patient at least can fulfill their stuff with the spiritual things. They can pray to God, for example. They can be more ready and they can have last wishes, for example, even if they suddenly die because they have never known the real condition, the actual condition of their body. Second thing, even if say, for example, when this kind of things is curable, when the disease is incurable, they are going to be more prepared. And this mentality aspect does matter to foster the medication in the first place, ladies and gentlemen. And in this case, we're talking about the right of the patient. This is the body is theirs, it's not even the doctor's. So in this case, why on earth you can lie to them for something which is theirs, not yours, ladies and gentlemen. So in the very first place, we believe that the right of the patient should be there. And we say in this case, there is not even harming anything. Because why? Because first we have proven to you there is psychological approach, then we have proven to you that is going to trigger more goods than even harms, ladies and gentlemen. What we have proven to you in this case, first, there is no such necessity to lie to the patient. And then the second one, we believe that this is the right of patient to know the actual condition of their body. For those reasons, we are proud to propose. Thank you.
Right, thanks speaker by speech, and we invite first speaker of opposition, the leader of opposition.
Ladies and gentlemen, what we got from first prop was basically a lot of generalized reasons why sometimes it might be okay to lie if there are positive effects, but not necessarily defending their side of the motion. Now what I want to do in my speech is I want to talk about basically four things. I'm going to first talk about that the first priority of a doctor is to heal the patient, not necessarily to inform. We believe that healing is the fundamental objective of what that doctor should do. But secondly, I'm going to talk about that doctors are in the best position to make such judgments in circumstances where not informing the patient might actually be good. In that sense. But the third thing I'm going to talk about is I'm going to talk about a lot of situations where doctors actually are allowed to make judgments without the consent of the patient we're talking about. But the last thing I'm going to talk about is lying can significantly compromise the health or the health of the patient, and these circumstances justify the reasons why sometimes lying is good. But let's go into what the first speaker basically tried to say. The first speaker basically said, no matter how bad it is, we think basically you should always tell the truth. He talked about it's infringing upon patients' rights. But we believe that doctors are actually in the best position to make the right judgments in actually healing that person. And we believe that if you're not able to heal that person, that eventually leads to infringing upon that person's right to live. And that right to live, to be cured, is the most significant element in what doctors should be there to uphold to. So we believe there sometimes can be compromises in terms of that aspect. But the second thing he said, that doctors sometimes simply don't care about their patients, and talked about how there won't be any incentive to help them out. Firstly, we say doctors often sometimes risk their lives to save patients in many different circumstances. If we look at certain places like war or the Iraq War or many other wars, doctors often risk their lives and actually die in the attempt to save their patients. There an accusation, an allegation that doctors somehow are sometimes compromising their whole agenda of working to save the very lives of their patients is ridiculous in that aspect. So let me go into what I want to talk about. We believe that the first priority is to heal of the patient. We believe in normal situations, and generally most situations, doctors usually will not lie. But most importantly, what we say is sometimes there is a conflictual situation when telling the truth can significantly compromise the health of the patient. And therefore, in these circumstances, their responsibilities lie. We believe that doctors take that Hippocratic oath, the Hippocratic oath, when they become doctors. And that oath, they say the first priority is to save that person's life and to cure the people. It doesn't necessarily say we shall inform as the first priority. We believe informing is sometimes the process of actually meeting that end, of saving those people's lives, but not necessarily the goal. It's not necessarily something that we should always uphold in these circumstances. But the second thing we would suggest is doctors are in the best position to make the right judgments in situations where they should tell the truth and should not tell the truth. We believe basically they have extensive experience and knowledge, the medical knowledge, in determining and actually calculating the long-term health circumstances of what this person is going to go through in the future and now, especially in that aspect. But more important, we believe that their fundamental role in society is to save lives and cure people. So we believe that goal should be met as first priority. And we believe that patients simply do not have that knowledge. Patients don't have the expert knowledge or the medical knowledge to make accurate judgments of their health, which is why we believe that doctors sometimes can actually be prioritized in that sense. But because of this social norm of how that doctors are able to make these calculated judgments and accurate judgments in terms of the health, we believe it does allow doctors to make certain judgments in certain emergency situations even without the consent of the patient. We point to you, that, for example, like anorexia patients in a lot of hospitals, a lot of hospital nurses and people there actually force feed the patients because if they don't eat, they eventually will die. We see that there's no consent in that aspect. But more importantly, we see there are a lot of traffic accidents or even major war accidents where sometimes they are in a coma, which they cannot represent or express their ideas. Even in these certain situations, it's more important to save the life first and then ask for consensus later on. So the focus is always about saving lives and curing the people in that aspect. Yes?
Explain to us how the right of the doctor itself is absolute, so that you can push aside the right of the patient to know their actual condition.
We're not saying it's absolute. We're saying that in certain circumstances, there are situations where doctors will have to make the call, not informing their patients of what the circumstances are for the betterment of the very patient in itself. So, furthermore, we would like to say that, there are these situations in where consensus or being informed is not always the first priority. So in what circumstances do we believe that lying can be justified? We believe there is a situation where you significantly compromise the health of the patient when you do indeed tell the truth. We believe that certain mental disorders, as they so say, for example, like depression, by telling that person is actually in severe depression in certain circumstances can actually make that person fall into more depression and therefore significantly compromise the health. We believe that in that aspect sometimes telling that, lying to that patient or manipulating the patient in terms of the psychological treatment process is sometimes also important in healing that patient in that aspect. But more importantly, we also believe that, for example, some people don't know that they're crazy, but telling them they're crazy can even lead to situations where that patient will commit suicide in that aspect. So doctors have have to make these judgments in these aspects as well. But more importantly, we also say that sometimes stress even compromises the health of the patient because it can even hurt their very immune system. So there are a lot of situations where doctors have to first put first priority in terms of the patient's health. More importantly, when telling the truth sometimes can significantly harm the patient's health, we think it's also very important for doctors to be able to lie to their patients in these very aspects. So for these reasons, we're very proud to propose.
Right, thanks speaker for his speech and invite first speaker or second speaker of government elect Prime Minister.
Okay, here, ladies and gentlemen, basically we see that there are mainly two rebuttals that I would like to make. Firstly, about the rights of the doctors versus the rights of the person itself. Yes, they agreed with us that the doctor's right to actually cure the patient in the way and in the method that the doctor believes is best for the patient is not absolute, but that they sort of like put it above the right of the patient itself to decide what they want to do with their body itself, ladies and gentlemen. While here, we believe the condition of the person is something personally connected with that only person itself, ladies and gentlemen. He is the one who has the full right of his body condition and of his whole life and of his future, of whatever will happen with his life. So that's why in the first place, ladies and gentlemen, we believe that no matter what the case is, no matter what the condition, no matter what the circumstances, that the right of this patient itself, the right of this person itself, should be put above the right of the doctors itself to cure this patient, regardless of the education that he has, the knowledge that the doctors has, etc., etc. Since at the very basic thing, ladies and gentlemen, it's a life of one person. Every person is granted one life, and every person is responsible for his or her own life. That is why the rights of that own individual person should be put at the very top, at the very first place, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. And second of all, second rebuttal that I would like to talk about here is, they tend to focus on the end of the result, which is the patient is cured. They kind of neglect the fact that there's a process in curing someone, ladies and gentlemen. It's not like the doctor makes one decision which the doctor thinks it's best, and then ta-da, the patient is cured. It's not like that, ladies and gentlemen. It needs a process, and that process also involves the struggling of that patient itself in order for them to get healthy, ladies and gentlemen. No, thank you. The greatest part there is the willingness of the patient itself to get cured, ladies and gentlemen. See, for example, if there are two patients that are suffering the same disease, if both of them are informed the same thing and they both perceived it differently, where one patient is actually saying that, oh my God, I think I can't handle it anymore, I just want to give up, while the other patient has the really high spirits to live, no thank you, and they have the motivation to continue living and keep on struggling. Even the doctor handles both of them with the same method, but if the way the patient receives it differently, then of course there will be different results in the end, ladies and gentlemen. That is why you can not only rely on the doctor side itself in making the decision to cure someone else, regardless of the knowledge that the doctor has, ladies and gentlemen. And next, they mentioned also about, no thank you, that the depression that can be happen when the doctor tells the patient, come on, as the previous speaker have told you, the doctor also learned about the psychology. They know how to communicate with their patients. They won't say you're crazy, you're dying. Of course, they have a special approach to talk to their patients. They tend to understand their patients more than even the patient himself understand his body condition, ladies and gentlemen. These doctors know how to persuade them to take the medication processes and stuff, ladies and gentlemen. These doctors already have the knowledge and they study that, not only the theoretical medical things on what medicines these patients should take. And so, even though in several special circumstances, we believe that there's no reason to justify this doctor to just take the decision by himself without consulting the patient himself. Before I move on, yes.
What is the purpose of you, if you're sick, going to a hospital to know you're sick or not to get cured? Sometimes lying is required to actually make that healing process possible because of deception.
Here, ladies and gentlemen, let's go on to my arguments, my points, and answer that rebuttal. here. When we go to the hospital, of course, we want to know actually what's wrong with me and what methods are needed for me to get healthy, ladies and gentlemen. And when the doctor's lying that you're actually okay, well, actually I'm not, then what's the point of me getting to the hospital? I mean, I'm not getting the truth information about myself in the end, ladies and gentlemen, if they're asking it like that. No, thank you. So what we want to get when we're going to the hospital is, of course, the true information from the doctor to us in order for us to get healthy. Because here, ladies and gentlemen, when you go to the hospital and you're maybe judged sick, you have a kind of like heart disease, then you need to take several processes, several steps in order for you to get better. And in taking those steps, of course, it's not like only one step and you're cured. You must maybe return like 7 times or every week you must consult with the doctor. And in taking every step, of course, the doctor itself has to make a consultation with the patient itself because, no thank you, all actions should be agreed by the patient as one responsible for the health and their body itself, for their own living, ladies and gentlemen. It is not right for the doctor to make a decision over someone else's body, over someone else's life, ladies and gentlemen. No thank you. So, in the very first place, how to make this mechanism work is by the doctor telling the true information, by the patient knowing the real condition, the real information, exact information about how their condition is, then they can make the right judgment on what should I do. The doctor itself, of course, they have like several alternatives, and the doctor doesn't just like, okay, so what do you want to do now? Of course not. The doctor has suggestions. You should do this, you should do this, you should do this. No, thank you. And if you take this step, then you will maybe feel like a little bit pain. Or if you take that step, then you will feel less pain, but it will take a longer time. So which one you prefer? The doctor, of course, gives many solutions and many suggestions to the patient itself, considering the plus and minuses of every decision the patients make. And in the end, the final decision is based on the patient's consideration itself, because the patient itself has their own life and they're responsible for their own body, and they have their own considerations and what they feel are capable to do with their own body and their own condition right now, ladies and gentlemen. So that is why we believe that in the end it is actually have to be mutual between the patient and the doctor itself, because if the doctor takes his own decision and you gotta do this, well actually the patient is feeling, oh my god, isn't there another way? I don't think that I'm capable in doing so. So how do you believe that the patient could get cured if they themselves don't feel ready to face all of those processes which they believe is too hard and they can't handle that thing in the first place, ladies and gentlemen? And then they were talking about the patients in the coma situation and stuff like that, which they cannot speak up for themselves. These patients, we believe, have families, ladies and gentlemen. And still, even if the patients cannot be consulted of what choices they would like to make, then the doctor should consult with the family in taking what's the best decision for their patients. And their patients, well, in the very first place, trusts the doctor better. So, in the end, the steps that they take in curing the patient will be a mutually understanding between the patient's side and the doctor's side itself, so in which whatever the decision is, the responsibility is there between the patient and with the doctor, not the doctor's side itself. So based on those reasons, we beg you to propose. Thank you.
Right, I thank the speaker for the speech, and now we invite the second speaker for opposition, the deputy of opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good afternoon to you, government members of the House. And now, Team Opposition stands up here to say, yes, doctors can lie, because doctors are there to cure people. That is, in fact, their first priority. And in the process of curing, lying is sometimes a process of it which is necessary for those patients to get cured. And these cases we're talking about are where there are no alternatives except to lie, to make sure that these patients stand up on their feet. For this process, lying is required. And before I go on to any constructives, please let me rebut some of the points made by the former speaker and team government as a whole. Now, I have 5 points of rebuttals to make on my rebuttals. First of all, the points mentioned by the rights of the doctors. They pointed out that the doctors' rights to lie, the doctors having lied to the patients underestimates their right to know. However, I would like to point out that here that in a hospital, we are dealing with not only the right to know, but the right to life and welfare and well-being. We're dealing with something more important than the right to know. We can see here that since this value, that which comes from lying to the patient itself, overweighs the fact of the right to know itself, we can safely say that the situation of lying is perfectly justifiable in the situation of the doctors. Now, onto my second level of rebuttal. Now, the speakers mentioned that it is a process of curing. The patients have to know in order to hang on to the process of curing because they have their will. But I would also like to point out that these are cases where, as we can see in exceptional situations where patients, they're in severe situations where there are not many alternatives except just to hang on. They say, "Doc, I'm just really too exhausted to hang on to this." And under their situation, the doctor has no choice but to say, "Well, sorry, mister, but we don't have much alternatives to give you to cure right now, so hang in there." Do you really think that this will make sure that these patients encourage their will to hang on in there? In these situations, we believe that it is for the best of the patients in their process of curing to not know this fact, for that doctors have to lie. On my third level of analysis, third rebuttal, we can see that in the cases of depression, and they can heal. We're talking about, we can point out that you're not always being lied when you go to the hospital. Doctors just don't lie to you because they're bored. They lie to you because they have found out there are no other options besides to lie in the process of your curing. That is the cases we are dealing about. So I believe that their argument here also false. Now, onto my fourth level of analysis, they pointed out that curing is a long process and it requires lots of consultation. Yes, curing is a long process, but I believe that has nothing to do with emotion, because we also believe that healing is a long process, and in severe situations, lying is required. No, thank you, sir. And finally, they're talking about doctors have alternatives they could point out to the patients in cases. But as we have told you, we're talking about exceptional cases when there is no alternative except to lie. For example, let's say that I'm a person that has cancer, but also has depression. Do you honestly think that when I am so depressed, telling me that I have cancer, do you really think it would encourage my will to hang in there? It'll be a miracle if I don't even slap myself in the face because of the fact that it hits me so hard in the face. No, thank you, sir. Now, as my 5 points of rebuttals have been finished, I will now go on to my constructives. But before, which will be the unnecessary clash of interest that happens within the doctors. But before I go on, let me point out to you what the leader of opposition came up here and mentioned to you. He has pointed out to you that in the Hippocratic Oath, the doctors have the first and foremost obligation to cure these patients. That's why they walk into the hospital, to get cured. And lying, no, thank you, sir. Lying is a process of that. And there are cases when lying is necessary, maybe sometimes compulsory, in making sure that this obligation is fulfilled to the extent where the patients walk out. For example, there are also new examples like Munchausen's disease, where patients can find out because they don't have any exceptional symptoms, but they feel like they have them. In these cases, lying is required. We can give them placebos to make them feel like they're cured, which is also a process of the Hippocratic Oath being made to its extent. And there are also examples of psychiatric wards where there are patients suffering from delusions and hallucinations. Doctors here cannot break the fact to them that they are crazy suffering from these symptoms. They have to tell them to hang on in there, everything's fine. Those are situations where nothing can be achieved without lying. Now, as I have pointed out what the leader of opposition has mentioned, now let me go into my constructives. Before I go on, are there any POIs?
Basically, when you want to do something dealing with the patient body, you need to make an agreement with the patient. At this level, if you have lied in the previous level, you need to tell the truth to the patient. So what's for it? Because in the end, you have to tell them the truth.
Sir, I believe that we have made it clear that the first and foremost premise that we go into the hospital is to get cured. Now, the right to knowledge as I had mentioned before, is overwhelmed by the right to life. Now, we have made it clear that it is the thing that should be considered first. Now, my argument will be made in 3 levels of analysis. First of all, what implementing this motion will bring? Well, first of all, before, in the status quo, the doctors sometimes lie to their patients for their good and curing. That is the status quo. Simple as that. But if this motion is implemented, they will never get to lie in situations, even when it is compulsory to actually cure them. Now, that's my first level. And second, now what will be the impact on the value of doctors? Before this motion is implemented, doctors, well, they always put the first priority of curing their patients in the first place. They would lie to them sometimes, but it was only for good purposes, to make sure that they could meet their family again, make sure that they could walk out of the hospital in one piece. But if this motion is implemented, they have another thing that's blocking their value of curing, which is you can't lie to them. Now, this leads on to my third level of analysis and the main point of my argument. What would be the clash that occurs? Now, since I have pointed out to you that lying steps in the procedure of curing a person, and a doctor will be penalized if not put in serious circumstances for lying to their patients, it will be a conflict between the doctor's personal interest of whether they will be penalized and keep their social status, and also a clash between saving their patients' situations and even in a large scale their lives. This situation is clearly going against what the Hippocratic Oath is saying. Thou shalt save your patients. And also an act of punishing the wrong people who are just trying to do their job, do what they were obligated to do. And to save these such sacred values and make sure that patients are given to their extent to be actually cured, I am very proud to oppose on this motion. Thank you.